Jai Hind students, welcome to English class. And today we are going to study chapter number 5, Indigo, from our main textbook, Flamingo. And for this, first of all, I am going to share the story on your screen. Let us see this. And here it is. And since we had studied up to page number 51 yesterday, so we are going to see that from where we have to begin today. And here up to this page we had already studied, and I had also given some homework to do to you to do. I hope that you would have done that in your notebook. And from the second last paragraph of page number 51 we are going to begin today. But before this, students, I just want to tell you that there is a very important question which you have to attempt. That is here, that both the questions you can easily do that, since those paragraphs have already been explained. Like see here the question number 1. Remember, you have to give the answer in 30 to 40 words each only. First question is, list the places that Gandhi visited between his first meeting with Shukla and his arrival at Champaran. So there were so many places Gandhi visited between his first meeting with Shukla and his arrival at Champaran. For this, easily that you can see that those things are given in the paragraph which had already explained. Like Gandhiji first meeting with Shukla was at Lucknow, as we know, which had been explained in the text. Then he went to Kanpur and other parts of India. He returned to his ashram near Ahmedabad, and later on he went to Calcutta, Patna and Muzaffarpur before arriving at Champaran. So these are categorically mentioned in the paragraph, so easily you can get the answer of that. But what I wanted to tell you, that this second question, which is even more important, what did the peasants pay the British landlords as rent? What did the British now want instead, and why? What would be the impact of synthetic indigo on the prices of natural indigo? This question has been divided into 3 parts, and remember student, this question is very important, and this can also be asked as long answer type questions. In that case, since question is divided into 3 paragraphs, then you will have to answer in 3 question is divided into 3 parts, so you will also have to give the answer in 3 paragraphs. So remember students, sometime it also happens the same question can be asked as a short answer type question, means you will have to answer in 30 to 40 words, or same question can also be asked in 120 to 150 words. So you should have the capability to elaborate it whenever it is required. Like this question, since it is important, so that's why we can discuss. Like when we talk about the answer of this, easily you can get from the different paragraphs. Like the peasants paid the British landlords indigo as rent, we know it well, and now Germany had developed synthetic indigo, so the British landlords wanted money as compensation for being released from the 15% of arrangement. In this way you can give the Answer of the second part. And the prices of the natural indigo would go down due to the synthetic indigo which was produced by Germany. So these are the answers. I don't need to tell you, you can easily understand because those paragraphs have already been explained, and you have to write these answers in your own words. Always you take care of this. Now let us proceed to the remaining part of the story from page number 51, the second last paragraph. So here it is that from where we have to start. So Gandhi and the lawyers now proceeded to conduct a far-flung inquiry into the grievances of the farmers. Now here see that Gandhi and the lawyers, Gandhi along with and he was assisted by some of the influential lawyers, and now Gandhi and lawyers proceeded to conduct a far-flung inquiry into the grievances of the farmers. They started an extensive inquiry into the grievances. Into the grievances means into the complaints, into the complaints of the farmers. And depositions means statements by about 10,000 peasants were written down, and notes made on other evidences, and some other notes also that have been collected on other evidences. Means there were so many complaints and so many evidences against the landlords. All those things have been collected, and documents were collected. The whole area throbbed with the activity of the investigators and the vehement protest of the landlords, since whole area at that time was vibrated with the activity of the investigators. So many investigators were present, Gandhiji, his lawyers, that extensive investigations on the complaints of the sharecroppers started. That whole area was vibrated with the activities, and not only this, that protest of the landlords, it was also vehement, forceful protest of the landlords were not silent, rather they knew they had extorted money illegally from the sharecroppers. So that's why they made a lot of forceful protest to stop the proceedings inquiry. And see, in the next paragraph it is mentioned that in June Gandhi was summoned to Sir Edward Gate, who was the lieutenant governor. And in the month of June, Gandhi was appeared before Sir Edward Gate, who was the lieutenant governor. And before he went, he met leading associates and again laid detailed plans for civil disobedience if he should not return. And Gandhiji was moving with the full proved plan, so he wanted to execute his strategy. So once again he discussed with his associates again before going to meet lieutenant governor, and he made a detailed plan for civil disobedience in case that he will not be returned from there. And Gandhi had 4 protracted interviews with the lieutenant governor, who as a result appointed an official commission of inquiry into the indigo sharecroppers situation. And when Gandhiji met lieutenant governor, his meeting held for he protracted interviews, that extensive interviews had been done with the lieutenant governor of Gandhiji, and as a consequence that appointed an official, lieutenant governor had appointed an official commission of inquiry into the indigo sharecroppers situation to listen to the uh, complaint complaints of the sharecroppers. The commission consisted of landlords, government officials, and Gandhi as the sole representative of the peasants. And in that commission, which was constituted by the lieutenant governor, that their landlords were there, government officials were there, and Gandhi was the sole representative on behalf of the peasants, means sharecroppers. Gandhi remained in Champaran for an initial uninterrupted period of 7 months. Now, here the author describes that Gandhi remained in Champaran, stayed in Champaran for an initial uninterrupted period of 7 months. Initially, in the beginning, he stayed there for 7 months continuously, and then again for several shorter visits. He used to visit the place several times for a shorter visit. The visit undertaken casually on the entreaty of an unlettered peasant in the expectation that it would last a few days, occupied almost a year of Gandhiji's life. Now, students, mark it as an important, because Gandhiji, this was the typical pattern of Gandhiji's working, as since the visit had been undertaken, casually by the entreaty of an, on the request of an uneducated peasant. uh, it was requested by a common man to Gandhiji to visit Champaran, and it was expected that it will take few days, but it had taken almost a year of Gandhiji's life, and this was the secret of the huge popularity among the masses of Gandhiji, that even he did not take anything lightly. Even on the request of Gandhiji, some big leaders would not have given importance to that, but Gandhiji had given so much importance to an uneducated peasant, which had taken almost 1 year of Gandhiji's life. And the official inquiry assembled a crushing mountain of evidence against the big planters. Now everything is clear when investigations started, that in inquiry, that a crushing mountain of evidence, a lot of evidence had been gathered against the big planters, British landlords, and when they saw this, they agreed in principle to make refunds to the peasants. And when British landlords saw that so many evidences against them, that in principle they became ready to refund the money which they had extorted illegally from the peasants. But another problem raised, that how much must we pay? They asked to Gandhiji, as they did not want to return entire money which they had taken. So that's why they asked Gandhiji that how much money they will have to pay back to the peasants. They thought he would demand repayment in full of the money which they had illegally and deceitfully extorted from the sharecroppers. And those British planters, means landlords, thought that Gandhiji would demand the repayment in full, entire money which they had illegally and deceitfully taken from the sharecroppers. And he asked only 50%, but Gandhiji had asked only for 50% of the money to be refunded. Means he did not demand money in full to be refunded to the sharecroppers. And there it seemed he seemed adamant, writes Reverend J.H. Hose, a British missionary in Champaran who observed the entire episode at close range. At that time, there was a writer J.H. Hose who was a British missionary in Champaran and who was observing that Indigo Champaran episode from the close range. So he felt, he reported, he wrote that it seemed that Gandhiji was rigid on that, means he will not compromise less than 50% of refund to the sharecroppers by the British landlords, and thinking probably that it would not give way, the representative of the planters offered to refund to the extent of 25%. And the representative of the planters thought that Gandhi will not be ready to take less than 50% of the refund, and that's why they offered. It was their cunningness, it was their cleverness, but cunningly they offered 25%, to think that Gandhiji will not be ready to accept 25% refund of money. But that did not happen actually, and to his amazement, Mr. Gandhi took him at his word, thus breaking the deadlock. Gandhi did not oppose at all, rather he accepted immediately 25% of refund to the sharecroppers, and in this way, the breaking the deadlock, Mahatma Gandhi had broken the deadlock, that crisis has been broken. But Gandhiji here, we can see that Gandhiji he was a visionary leader, so that's why he was thinking, his thinking was different. He was thinking that money, he became ready to accept 25% on behalf of the sharecroppers, because Gandhiji had a different idea. He did not give importance to the money, rather he was thinking something else, and he was focusing on the breaking the conflict, the deadlock. And now this settlement was adopted unanimously by the commission, and the commission agreed to this, and this agreement was accepted by everyone unopposed. So Gandhi explained that the amount of refund was less important. Now students, you can see that this point is very important here, that why Gandhiji had became ready to accept 25% of refund of the money, because for Gandhiji the money was less important than the fact that the landlords had been obliged to surrender part of money, and with it part of their prestige. And because that earlier landlords were thinking, they were unquestioned, they never be they were never be humbled towards the sharecroppers. They were not giving any importance to the sharecroppers, and sharecroppers were fear stricken. They never thought about getting any kind of justice from the British landlords. But here money was not important for Gandhiji, because they did not surrender only money, rather they also obliged, in this way they also surrendered their prestige before the sharecroppers. And further, Uh, Gandhiji reported that therefore, as far as the peasants were concerned, the planters had behaved as lords, because planters, as much as sharecroppers, peasants concerned, the planters had never given any importance to them. They were behaving them very badly, with them very badly. They were thinking themselves that they were the lords, and they were considering themselves above the law. And now the peasant saw that he had rights and defenders. Now, students, again, this point is important to note, that they thought, now the peasant saw that he had rights and defenders. He learned courage in this way, that sharecroppers learned courage and showed the courage to learn, to raise their voice, and they got the confidence, if they will fight for their rights, if they will fight for their justice, and then they will get the support of someone, and uh, they got the courage, they got the confidence to raise their voice for any kind of exploitation, any kind of injustice, if uh, any more time happens with them. And now further, let us see that events justified, the author describes that event justified Gandhiji's position, and that Champaran episode, Indigo events justified Gandhiji's position. And because of that Champaran episode, Gandhiji got the huge support of the common people, and it also, justified that Gandhiji's position, that how big leader he was, and how huge support he can get, even not only from the common people, rather from the intellectuals, like lawyers. Within a few years of the British planters, within a few years, the British planters abandoned their estates, and within few years, the estates of the British planters had been broken, and which reverted to the peasant, which went back to the peasants, and indigo sharecropping disappeared completely. And in this way, within few years, what was the aftermath impact of that incident, that the big states, which had been a big piece of land which had been divided into states, which were owned by the British landlords, now it had been broken. Landlord system had been broken in few years, and those lands where that peasants and sharecroppers were working as tenant, those piece of land, those estates reverted to the peasants, went back to the peasants, and in this way peasants became the owner of those lands, and the indigo sharecropping disappeared forever from Champaran. Now let us see the next paragraph. Gandhi never contented himself with large political or economic solutions. Now it was the political problem which had been solved by Gandhiji, but Gandhiji was a different kind of leader. He was not satisfied only with the solution of the political or economic part. Rather, he saw the cultural and social backwardness. He saw the cultural and social backwardness uh, in the Champaran villages, and wanted to do something about it immediately. Since Gandhiji had spent so much time, almost a year of his life there in Champaran, so that's why he also observed the cultural and social backwardness among the villagers of Champaran district, and he wanted to do something about it immediately. He wanted to improve their social and cultural backwardness. So he appealed for teachers, and first of all, he wanted to educate them because most of the peasants, most of the farmers were uneducated, and it was the root cause. Gandhiji realized that it was the root cause. First of all, uh, they should be educated, so that's why Gandhiji appealed, requested for the teachers, and Madhav Desai and Narhari Parikh, two young men who had just joined Gandhi as disciples, as disciples, as his students, as his followers, and their wives volunteered for the work, and they became ready to offer their services uh, selflessly, voluntarily. And several more came from Bombay, Pune, and other distant parts of the land. Not only these people, rather several other people also came from the different part of the country like Bombay, Pune, and other distant parts of the land to support the noble cause of Gandhiji. And Devdas, who was the Gandhiji's youngest son, he also arrived from the ashram, and so did Mrs. Gandhi. And Mrs. Gandhi also arrived in support to support Gandhiji for the upliftment of the poor villagers. So primary schools were opened in 6 villages. Initially, primary schools were opened in 6 villages. Kasturbai taught the ashram rules on personal cleanliness and community sanitation. And Kasturbai, Gandhiji's wife, that she taught to the villagers about the ashram rules, and she also taught about the cleanliness and community sanitation, how to maintain the community sanitation, how to maintain the personal and family health hygiene. All those things had been taught by Kasturbai to the villagers. And health conditions were miserable, but their health conditions of the villagers were quite pathetic. So Gandhi got a doctor to volunteer his services for 6 months. Gandhiji was such a huge leader, so popular, that everyone became ready to help Gandhiji voluntarily. So Gandhi got a doctor to volunteer his services for 6 months, to give his services for 6 months without payment, and 3 medicines were available: castor oil, quinine, and sulfur ointment. And then 3 basic medicines were made available for the villagers. One was the castor oil, second was quinine, and the sulfur ointment. And anybody who showed a coated tongue, means uncleaned tongue, was given a dose of castor oil. And anybody who was suffering from malaria fever uh, was given quinine plus castor oil. Anybody with skin eruptions who was suffering from any kind of skin disease or skin pimples or eruptions, he had been given ointment plus castor oil. In this way, that with the efforts of Gandhiji, the health, hygiene, and health conditions of the villagers had been improved. Now, in next paragraph, we see that author describes that Gandhi noticed the filthy state of women's clothes, and during his stay, Gandhi ji also realized that the women's clothes, the filthy state of women's clothes, filthy, dirty, that women's clothes were quite dirty. They were wearing dirty clothes. So he asked Kasturbai to talk to them about it, and then he asked Kasturbai, his wife, to talk to those women who were feeling filthy. And one Woman took Kasturbai into her hut and said, "Look, there is no box or cupboard here for clothes." And because their conditions were very pathetic, very miserable, they were very poor, they were suffering from extreme poverty. In order to highlight their extreme poverty condition, uh, that author describes that one of the women from the village took Kasturbai into her hut, into her house, and said to her, showed her house and said to her that, "Look, there is no box or a cupboard here for clothes," because there was no box or cupboard in her house to keep her clothes. And because she told that the sari I am wearing is the only one I have, because she was so poor that she could not have more than one sari, and that sari she was wearing every day. It means that the villagers' conditions were very miserable, very distressful, very pathetic, and Gandhiji made an effort to improve their social conditions by staying there along with his family and supporters. Now, in next paragraph, we see it is mentioned that during his long stay in Champaran, Gandhi kept a long distance watch on the ashram, because Gandhiji had to stay for a very long period of time in Champaran. So from there, Gandhiji was monitoring to his ashram, and he sent regular instructions by mail and asked for financial accounts. And the kind of work he was doing there for the upliftment of the poor villagers, he required financial supports, he required money, so he kept on sending mail regularly to the ashram for the financial support. And once he wrote to the residents that it was time to fill in the old latrine trenches and dig new ones, otherwise the old ones would begin to smell. Even that he realized he wanted to eradicate their social backwardness uh, from the grassroots level. So that's why he observed each and everything in the village minutely. Even that he talked about the latrine trenches which was filled, and then to dig new ones, otherwise that would have been smelled badly. That he observed each and everything, and he wanted to solve each and every problems of those poor villagers, and it was the symbol of a great leader, a leader of masses, which Gandhiji had proved to stay in Champaran. The Champaran episode was a turning point in Gandhiji's life. Now, student, this is a very important question. This statement has been asked. The question based on this statement has been asked repeatedly in your board examination as a long answer type question. The Champaran episode was a turning point in Gandhiji's life. Elaborate. Or it can also be asked in another way: the Champaran episode was a turning point in Gandhiji's life. Discuss. Or do you think the Champaran episode was a turning point in Gandhiji's life? Means this question can be asked in any way, and you will have to elaborate up to 150 words, 120 to 150 words, this answer. So definitely it was the turning point. Many points you can mention in that. Let us see that what is given here. So what I did, he explained, was a very ordinary thing. Gandhiji was so humble, so polite, that even after doing such a great job, he did not want to take any credit for himself. And he said that what I did was a very ordinary thing. And what he did, he said that I declared that the British could not order me about in my own country. What he did, that he declared, he very politely he admitted that he did a very small thing, very common thing, very ordinary thing, that he declared that the British could not order me about in my own country. Means in this way that he started a freedom struggle of India against the Britishers, and he declared that Britishers, since the country is our country is of Indians, and Britishers were the foreigners, they don't have any right to rule, to stay in India and rule on Indian people. So that's why he declared that it was the declaration that Gandhiji, after Champaran episode, that Gandhiji was going to be involved in the freedom movement of India. And this idea he got especially from this episode of Champaran district of Bihar. Now let us see in next paragraph. The author describes that, but Champaran did not begin as an act of defiance, disobedience. Champaran did not begin as an act of defiance, as an act of disobedience only. Rather, it grew out of an attempt to elevate, to lessen, to reduce the distress of large numbers of poor peasants. Means it was not only to Gandhiji showed there, experimented the started the civil disobedience movement from Champaran episode. Rather, it grew out to an attempt to elevate. Means it was really an attempt from Gandhiji to lessen the distress, the problem of the large numbers of the common man, like the poor peasants. And this was the typical Gandhi pattern, and this was the typical Gandhi pattern. His politics, now students mark it, because this statement is very important. It was the typical Gandhi pattern, because his politics were intervened, his politics were mixed with the practical day-to-day problem of the millions. Means he was not satisfied only to get the political gain. He was not that kind of leader that who was working only for eyeing for a political gain only. Rather, he really want to involve himself to eradicate the problem, to solve the problems of the millions of the common people. He was not focusing on one particular group, rather he was concerned with the common man. And his was not a loyalty to abstractions, rather it was a loyalty to living human beings. His loyalty was not abstractions, not impractical, rather his loyalty, his faith was, he was very loyal towards the living, towards the common people, towards the human being. So his approach was absolutely practical, and that's why, that was the reason of huge popularity of Gandhiji, among huge popularity and support of Gandhiji from the common man, and which later on he also used in the freedom struggle of India. In everything Gandhi did, moreover, he tried to mold a new free Indian who could stand on his own feet and thus make India free. And in that way, Gandhiji had supported, Gandhiji tried to mold a new free Indian that who was stand on his feet. Means he supported Indian to be self-reliant, to be self-dependent. And now let us see the next paragraph, and here the author describes that early in the Champaran action, Charles Freer Andrews, who was the English pacifist who had become a devoted follower of the Mahatma, and he came to bid farewell uh, Gandhi farewell before going on a tour of a duty to the Fiji Islands. You know, Charles, remember students this name, the Charles Freer Andrews. In board examination, a question has been raised, in previous year uh, regarding this Charles Freer Andrews, who was a great follower of Mahatma Gandhi, and before, because he had to go to the Fiji Islands, and before uh, going to Fiji Islands, he came to Gandhi to bid a farewell, and Gandhiji's lawyer friends thought it would be a good idea for Andrews to stay in Champaran and help them. And his lawyer friends of Gandhiji wanted that, since he was the great follower of Gandhiji's idea, Gandhiji's principle, so they told Gandhiji that if Charles Freer Andrews stay there and help them against the Britishers, it would be good idea, and they will get a moral support from the Britishers against the Britishers. Then Andrews was willing if Gandhi agreed, and Andrew was also wanted to give support to the Indian people against the Britishers if Gandhiji was agreed. But Gandhi was vehemently opposed. But Gandhiji opposed forcefully to this idea of the lawyers, and he said that, you think that in this unequal fight it would be helpful if we have an Englishman on our side. He understood the minds of the lawyers, and he told that you are thinking, that lawyers were thinking, that if they will get the support of an Englishman against the English people for their freedom, uh, this shows the weakness of your heart. And Gandhiji told to them, it means this shows the weakness of your heart. And then Gandhiji told, the cause is just and you must rely upon yourself to win the battle, because the cause is noble, and because they were the Indian and they should fight their battle of their own. They should be self-dependent to fight against the Britishers. They should not seek support of any of the foreigner against the any of the Britishers against the Britishers. So you should not seek a prop or support in Mr. Andrews because he happens to be an Englishman, Gandhiji said. And he had read our minds correctly. Rajendra Prasad comments. Later on, Rajendra Prasad commented that Gandhiji read their minds correctly, and we had no reply. And he also said that they did not have any reply, and Gandhi in this way taught us a lesson in self-reliance. So self-reliance, in this way Gandhiji had taught a lesson to the lawyers of self-dependency, self-dependence, self-reliance. They should be relied upon themselves for the noble cause, rather than seeking support of any outsiders, any Britishers against the British rule. In this way, that students see the last statement is also very important, because once that the question based on this statement, long answer type questions have already been asked on the basis of this statement. And see, the last line says that self-reliance, Indian independence and help to sharecroppers were all bound together. In this way, that it was realized that self-reliance, self-dependence, Indian independence, and help to sharecroppers were all bound together, because that Gandhiji had proved that self-dependency. First of all, he made the poor sharecroppers self-dependent, and also he taught a lesson to the lawyers of self-dependency. And he when he came to help the sharecroppers, he got a huge support not only from the intellectuals, from the lawyers, rather he got a huge support of the common people who are considered unimportant in the national freedom movement. But Gandhiji has got a huge support which he utilized later on in the freedom struggle of India. In this way, self-reliance, Indian independence, and help to sharecroppers were combined, were bound together. Now, students, today's class is over here. Rest of the questions you will have to attempt here. That you can see that question number 1 is very important, and understanding the text. All these questions which comes under the column of understanding the text, you will have to attempt all these answers in 120 to 150 words each, and I advise you to utilize the maximum word limit of 150 words. So question number 1 is very important. And how do you know that ordinary people too contributed to the freedom movement? Freedom movement means all these questions easily you can do, and write the answers of all these questions in your notebook, and additional questions I will give you later on. So your today's class is over. Thank you for joining me, and have a nice day.